So welcome back. Once again, I'm Adam. We're joined today by Nicola and John, and we're talking about landmark or benchmark exemplary fragrances in certain categories. And this is part 3. We've gone through a whole host of categories so far, kind of broad, things like florals, things like spicy perfumes, that kind of thing. And our effort here is to kind of examine like what the benefit of categorizing fragrances. Another thing about it is that it's really interesting to put a restriction on ourselves to say, this is a benchmark in this general category, and here's why. So we're trying to learn from each other on that and learn more about each of these fragrances by doing that exercise. And so we're happy that folks have been, enjoying it thus far, leaving some really positive comments, and we'll throw you another kind of shout out at the end. But in the meantime, today we're going to cover I guess in comparison to what we've been doing, a little bit more like out there, quote unquote, categories, insofar as their user friendliness varies a lot person to person. But today we're going for smoky perfumes, milky perfumes, natural fragrances, all natural fragrances, modern fragrances, and another kind of category that we just had a little bit of fun with in the form of magical perfumes, and we will get into what that means when we get there. But let's start off with smoky.
Well, I'll pick this up first if you don't mind, John, because I'm going to shamelessly cheat. I have brought not one but 2 to this, because the first one is Embers by Rouge Bunny Rouge. And the reason I'm not counting this is because, as you guys will both know, it's discontinued. However, it is my favourite, the most beautiful smoky perfume ever. It's stunning.
Should have brought my bottle down so that we could all do that at the same time, but anyway.
To me, it's like a spent sweet match. I think it's incredibly sexy. Almost kind of a little bit embarrassing to wear in public, because there's something a little bit, I don't know, risque about it somehow. And I don't really know why that is, if I think about it, but it is absolutely stunning. It's sweet resins underneath this real smoky vein. And to me, I mean, the longevity is incredible. It's an absolute travesty that it's discontinued. Rouge Bunny Rouge, I think, have discontinued all their fragrances now, or if not all of them, the vast majority of them. And they had some really good scents in the collection. And I love it. I wouldn't be without it, but I hate to recommend discontinued fragrances to people because they're going to really struggle to get hold of them. So this is why I've cheated. And as my backup, I've brought The Architects Club by Arquiste, which is a beautiful smoky vanilla. One of my favourite things in perfume is scents that smell of paper or have like a papery note. And this does, which I find utterly addictive. But on top of that is this beautiful, it's not a particularly sweet vanilla. It does have sweetness in it, but you don't smell it and go, oh, it's cupcakes. It's much more woody and resinous, and like it's just been smouldering around the edges. Thoroughly beautiful perfume, and one that I wear an awful lot. I mean, as you can see from my bottle, it's probably less than half full now. Just absolutely gorgeous, from a great brand as well. So yeah, that's me. That's my shameless cheating. I'm sorry about that, but
I think we can forgive you of that.
Yes.
Over to you, John.
Yeah, sure thing. I have to say, of all categories that we've talked about so far, I have so many smoky perfumes. This was extremely difficult. And even as I was sitting here, I thought, oh, there's another one in the cabinet of fragrances that I probably should have grabbed. And maybe I'll just reserve it for another topic that deserves something that's sort of smoky. Even sitting here now, I'm sort of looking at the few choices that I've made and which ones are best suited for this. But I think what Nicola said about Rouge Bunny Rouge and Embers, and why it is kind of an important perfume, and maybe we're helping to convince someone to bring it back or something, is that there's sort of just a pure smoky smell, and then you kind of, that deviates into, I realized smoke can be many kinds of things. There's sort of dry wood smoke, there's very oily smoke, there's sort of machine-based smoke, or there's like the smell of electronics and that kind of like, there's all of these different smells of smoke. And I think that's why it's a much broader range of smells than I thought. So I opened this up a bit to, well, what are some other smoky perfumes that I like? And one that I'm not sure if people would automatically recognize as a smoky perfume is one of the sort of Privé line Christian Dior's, which is Purple Oud. And this is what I like about it is that it's kind of been sort of typical of some of the Privé fragrances, is that it's not, it's not what you would expect it to be. And it's light on oud, and it's far more of a kind of a saffrony pink pepper and just a touch of oud, but more wood kind of a fragrance. But within all of that, there's a very distinctly smoky center, like kind of like right in the center of the fragrance. Like right now, it's still there. I think there's also a hint of like tangerine or orange, and you're still getting pink pepper and that sort of salty stuff in the beginning. But right in the center of it is this really strong, steady, not overwhelming smoky accord. And I think what I enjoy is that it's taking that aspect of oud and featuring that, as opposed to so much the really woody part of it, or the really kind of foul barnyardy aspects of oud, and putting it into a slightly fantasy realm, which I really like. I like this imagining of smoke. It's beautifully done, and it's for someone who wants something that's a little bit easier to wear that's smoky. I would say that Purple Oud captures that, and it makes it very unisex, very adaptable, easy to wear in many different cases. Yeah, it's a great fragrance, and it's a nice treatment of smoke.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, John. It is a really good fragrance, and it's like you say, it's that refined smoke, isn't it? It's kind of taken down a little notch, and I think you're right as well. It's very unisex, and I could imagine myself wearing it to more of an evening thing for me. But I think it's a lovely one. Yeah, good choice.
Yeah.
That's the thing about smoke accords, really. They can go in so many different directions. And I'm really curious to smell it paired with an oud accord, and especially one that's supposedly user-friendly in that respect. I know that one time, so I have my fragrance blending desk right over there, and I've been sitting at that before trying to very gingerly handle cade oil, which is kind of, between that and birch tar, you have two materials there that many people might be familiar with if they smelled it in isolation, if they enjoy or have smelled many smoky fragrances, because they are materials that have either been extracted from to create new synthetic versions of, or they are natural materials that have been used in many smoky accords. And, the problem with them is that they are very aggressive and very long lasting, and they can sometimes play up the harsher elements of the smell of smoke. And one time I spilled a little bit, just a tiny drop on my hand, and it was there a long time through many hand washes, through many showers. It was a little bit nightmarish, and now I'm a little mousy when I try a smoky fragrance for that reason. So I really have to watch myself with it. But I do like the idea of smoky perfumes, and I really like the idea of, smoke accords that get away from that campfire smell a little bit and get into something a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more polished. It doesn't necessarily have to be more wearable or user-friendly for me to be interested in it. But when I look for a smoky perfume, I definitely look for something that is a little less raw material and a little bit more manufactured in its design.
I think you've hit the problem with smoky perfumes right on the head there, because if they're too, unrefined birch tar, they smell like barbecues, and nobody wants to smell meaty. When you're sort of, wandering around doing your day job, you don't want to smell like burnt steak, even though you might like to eat it. So I think you're right. We do need things that are that little bit more refined, that little bit more elegant, that take it away from barbecue and into something a little bit perhaps more ritualistic, a bit more incensey or refined or something like that. So I'm really interested what you've chosen.
Okay, well, I mean, so I have chosen a perfume called Lamplight Penance from the Chatillon Luxe line, perfumer Sean Mayer out of St. Louis, Missouri. The Chatillon line is based around his home city of St. Louis and sort of its history and the things that make it a very unique, interesting area. Lamplight Penance has a whole interesting backstory behind it that I'll save for those who are interested in the perfume itself to read on their own. I will say, though, that this take on smoke is sort of that thing I was hinting at earlier. It's like going into an old restaurant where they used to allow smoking, and it's sort of settled onto the, dare I say, a little unclean furniture that's maybe like a leather furniture that really soaks in all the sense of a room and of a place. And it's done so over the course of many years. So it's that kind of like the impression of smoke that was there kind of smell. It's not like standing near actively burning or even actively embering fireplace. It's got this kind of like aged stale quality. And I say stale, it has a negative connotation. But I'm just trying to describe that one aspect of the smoky accord in it. There's some patchouli used and some patchouli isolates, like mahoganate is a material that's used. I know that much after talking with the perfumer for a bit. And mahoganate has this like laurel leaf patchouli woody tone to it that is really beautiful. And so it kind of at first sniff has like a bit of like aldehydic qualities and some like high register fruit notes going on. There are some fruit accords in it, some berry notes, and I think peach note as well. But they aren't particularly sweet as much as they are just sort of light and very like golden hued, if you will. And the contrast there against the darker elements, the wood, the patchouli, the smokiness, is really something special. So I really like this one because it definitely captures that kind of image, like I said, of a building or an old room that has kind of held on to its memories, its sense. And that's sort of a cliched notion, I think, in some respects. We see this inspiration being explored a lot in niche and independent perfumery, but this is one that really, I think, is very successful at capturing that kind of idea. And it's very appropriate for the line. Like I said, it's a historical based line. It tells a lot of stories about a specific place. And I think that that's something that makes it very successful and very interesting and very much like kind of emblematic of like that modern indie approach to perfume. So really interesting stuff here. It's not for everybody. The smoke, like I said, is sort of subdued in it, but it has some high notes, has some high register things going on. So, it takes a little while to mellow out on the skin. And that's something that I enjoy about it. It's something that I think wears particularly well in semi-cool, semi-warm autumnal days. And I think it really complements that kind of season extraordinarily well. And I love the perfume itself, I will say. You see a mix of reviews about it. And I think the reason for that is because it has some interesting contrasts in it that might take people by surprise. And whether or not that's a good thing for you is to be determined. But Lamplight Penance from Chatillon Luxe is my smoky choice.
And it's superb name. What a great name.
Yeah, I know. Now that you mention it, Nicola, yeah, I think it's got to be among the top 5 coolest names I've heard in the industry. It's really kind of cool.
It is, yeah. That sounds really pretty fascinating, though. I like a lot of what you said about it. It sounds really good.
Oh, I'll bring it over to you, John. It's really really cool. And I'll try to get a sample to you, Nicola. I really wish I could just drive over to Yorkshire really quick.
Yeah.
This is another interesting category because, well, they're all great, right? But in their own special way. I like Milky Perfumes. I know that I think it was Jean-Claude Elena who once said don't put milky things in perfumes. I think, but I do think people some folks like milky things in perfumes, but it's more of a modern sensibility. But again, I'm trying to broaden my sensibilities about it. And what I've always associated for me has been a very milky thing is there's a couple of elements that I guess if you draw a kind of complex Venn diagram, there's certain notes that are milky to me, which are things like fig, like green fig especially, and coconut. And of course, your typical kind of lactose-based things. But when I think milky, first thing that always comes to my mind is Philoxicos, which, and I don't know if anyone else has chosen Philoxicos or not, but and I know this is almost, I almost worried that is this too easy, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, everybody's got a bottle of that somewhere, but maybe not. I was actually sort of late to some of the deep perfumes, and this also is one of those tantalizing, see, this is just so unbelievably milky, but in that very fig leaf sort of way. And but what I love so much about this is that it manages somehow to merge, at the base of it is kind of that very rich, fruity, very kind of like meaty sort of fig, very pulpy sort of fig. And then right at the top and center, though, is that very green fig, which is very realistic as well. I managed to actually get like a little potted fig plant, which did not winter over very well here. And we do need to take it indoors in my climate, our climate, Adam. But I just waited like 2 days too long or something, and it wasn't happy. But for that summer, I was able to smell the leaves pretty frequently, and it's got that very peculiar smell that is very special to figs. And it's bracing, it's green, it's slightly astringent, it's very milky, it's very much aligned with coconut. It's very soothing, like it's an incredibly soothing smell. I find it unbelievably comforting, but also like something that's very much alive and awake on the skin. It's not like it's not always soft and smooth. It actually has a slightly prickly feeling, like what's it akin to? Sort of like that feeling of when a citrus peel like is expressing, like, bursting off some of that oil, like that kind of a sensation to it. So it's a unique texture as well. So the feel of it is really interesting. So this is my vote for milky, and also a very novel approach to milky as a note. What about you, Nicola? What do you have for milky as a fragrance?
Well, you all can just stop right there, because I have found the ultimate. I've only recently found it. This is I'm going to go out there on a limb and say this is the best milk perfume I have smelled. I love milky scents. I've got a ton of them. I could have picked several for this. And in fact, when we were preparing for this, I was thinking, oh, well, clearly I'm going to pick that one or this one or this one. And then I smelt this whilst in Italy and was like, no, that's the winner. So this is Late Concentré by Chabot. I don't know how you say that, like really badly. My French is
no, you did fine. You did fine. I know this perfume. This is amazing.
So good. It is like you put on a pan of milk to boil and then concentrate that smell and then just inhale it. It's so milky. It's so soothing. It's so wonderful. It just, to my mind, it's blown all other milk perfumes out of the water. And it's beautiful. I don't really know what to say about it. It's just great. It's just, if you want to smell calm, comforted, if you want to project that, this is the perfume for you, because it just smells like warm milk and it's dead nice.
They are more or less the almost the crown kings and queens of the milk fragrances, aren't they? Like Chabot, they've cornered. Because I have to say, I was just shocked when I smelled some of their stuff. I think there's like a milk and biscuit one, and then there's a chocolate milk one, I think, as well. I mean, there's some crazy, wonderful milky perfumes that they made.
Yeah, and I think Jean-Claude Eleanor maybe has it right. You know, you're not going to smell the most sophisticated if you wear a milky perfume, but who cares?
Right. That's
if it brings you some joy during your day, if it makes you, you know, it makes your day a little bit easier, then, you know, sod that, wear it anyway, because, you know, being sophisticated all the time is overrated, quite frankly. So yeah, that's my pick, and I'm completely, as I say, it's a recent discovery for me. Completely in love with it, and going to be wearing it a lot because I just really like it. Really like it. It's one that I would probably put on to go to bed quite often because I think it's very soothing. Or if I'm having a high stress day, spray some of that on, I'll just calm down immediately. Yeah, cracking perfume. Absolutely.
Nice choice. That's a great one. It really is.
Well, Jean-Claude Elena can, who is he really to lecture any of us about this, Mr. Santal Masoya Hermes's line, okay? I mean, pot meet kettle, right? And come on. You know, headline, Fragrantica editor calls out Johnny Hiram. Well, I did want to briefly comment too on your picks. First of all, I need to try the Shabbat perfume. That sounds very interesting, and just quickly looked at the note list too and saw that it had coconut and caramel. So I feel like maybe even if I don't enjoy it, a sample would go very far for my fiance, who is a big coconut fan in general. So if that note is present in there at all, I'm sure it'll be appreciated. And then for Los Ecos, I think I need to really give it another shot now that I'm because I tried it kind of earlier on when I was getting into fragrances, and it didn't really strike a chord with me, but I only sniffed it for a few seconds off of a strip. And then I thought that was supposed to be like what fig represents in perfumery. So for the longest time, I just didn't really go out of my way to smell many other fig scents because I thought I smelled I foolishly thought I smelled like the perfect representation of the note and wasn't, at least overly thrilled at first by it. So I made a terrible mistake because now I'm rediscovering the joys of fig and as a note and fragrance, and I really enjoy it. So I have to give that one another shot and try to just sit down with it and pay attention to it a little bit more. I have to recognize my errors, the errors of my ways.
Just as a heads up on that, this is almost like, it's not an exclusive, but it's almost an exclusive. Manos Gerakinis, Greek perfumer, has a new fig coming out that we smelled in Italy. It's stunning. It's a really milky fig, very gourmand, very, very beautiful. It's not quite out yet, so do keep checking Fragrantica for when the announcement comes out, but it is gorgeous. And if you're looking for a new fig to try, highly recommend that one.
Nice.
I need to check that out immediately. Yeah, that sounds great. I can't wait for it to come out. I'd be really curious to try it. I've been sort of on a big fig note kick. And I also, one other, side note, John, specifically for you, but I think this scent would go up Nicola's alley as well. So that newer fragrance from Olfactive Studio, Dancing Light, I did get to try that, and that has a milky touch to it. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a milky fragrance. It's sort of more of like a white floral spiced, little background greenery note of pine wood, but it's really quite delightful. And it also has a note of pink pepper in it that I know that's sort of a pet note for you, John. So between the milkiness for Nicola and the pink pepper for John, I think it'd be at least worthy of getting your noses on. And I would recommend it to the general Fragrantica viewership as well. It's a fun fragrance, great for the ssummer. We'll do summer scents next time, by the way, just a little heads up. So my milky pick was I was alarmingly unable to find it to bring it downstairs, and I just moved, so I'm like, oh no, what happened? Pretty sure I was almost obsessively going through everything I owned pre-move and like making sure it was packaged appropriately. But so my milky pick is Monde from Slumber House, and that is I hesitate to bring a Slumber House just because the house is notably sometimes hard to get, and it's at a higher price point, not the highest certainly in the niche space, that's for sure, but it's a little pricey, and it's also difficult to get, and I feel bad that I want to talk about something adventurous and fun and something I really enjoy. And then, hey, good luck finding a sample of it. You can. It is technically something that we think the house is going to continue to produce. Just, I'm not sure where you can get it at this very moment. So stay tuned on availability. But the scent itself. So like my smoky pick, I would say that Monde is another kind of fragrance where the subject note that we're talking about here of milkiness is sort of subtle. But I do think it qualifies as milky. It just has this sort of clever cast of characters that kind of go along with it and support and amplify and then contrast the subject note there of milkiness. So there's the whipped cream accord, and that's something that I never thought I'd see from Slumber House, which is sort of a notable, like, kind of serious, arty, mysterious kind of house. And the fact that they released a perfume with a whipped cream accord was sort of interesting to me. I think we had talked about this briefly. I think it was the last part where Nicola made the point of like, hey, sometimes we as perfume people, we look down a little bit on gourmand notes as sort of less refined. And I think this is a good example of, it is kind of a gourmand and then it's kind of a milky thing. It's kind of a woody thing. So I didn't want to classify it fully as gourmand, but this is definitely an example of where those gourmand notes, I mean, really can be rendered beautifully and with clarity and with a sense of refinement, for lack of a better term. So it's got this, like I said, a sort of a cast of characters going along with it. I referred to it in my review of it as like a autumnal cornucopia of notes that remind us of the fall in the northern hemisphere. And it is sort of like pumpkin pudding, a completely unsweetened whipped cream, like no sugar at all. And then something of like a tart apple compote sort of cutting into that and adding some projection and some counterpoint to the richer notes. And then there's also some sandalwood, and obviously, milky sandalwood, nobody's surprised to learn of that addition to it. And an amber accord. And something that the perfumer described here is like this idea of a pillowy amber accord. And those are his exact words, pillowy amber. And I really agree with that notion. It wears as this textured amber. And I have not smelled an amber accord like it yet. It has like a cereal milk kind of quality to it, and hence the milky choice here. And it is another kind of random oddball from this house that makes exclusively oddballs, right? I struggle to think of any other milky accord, any other amber accord, any other take on red fruit and wine, any other take on peach and brighter fruits that I've smelled thus far that smell anything like it. So it earns a lot of points for originality, but the originality aspect of it aside, I just think it's a very satisfying cooler weather wear for my taste, but you could, wear anything you want anytime you want. But I suggest wearing it in like the low 60, late 50 degree kind of range Fahrenheit. It's really something. And it has that, like I said, the milkiness is sort of subdued. And you would think that with all these fruit notes, with all these heavier, like bass notey kind of structures that I just listed off there a minute ago, you'd think that it'd be a really heavy perfume. But the weird thing is that it is the furthest thing from it. To me, it actually sometimes disappears for a couple of hours only to kind of wisp back up at me later. And I have absolutely no idea how you as a perfumer can create this thing that's just packed with these, cool weather, heavy, woody, full-bodied kinds of notes, wine accord, whipped cream accord, and yet it's like wispy and airy and like breezy. And I have no idea how he pulled that one off, but I think it's really a stunning selection.
I have just a sample of it that I purchased, and what I do think you've described well is the milkiness is a particular kind where it's almost it reminds me a little bit of cooked cereal, like cooked wheat cereal or something, in that very particular sort of and certainly there's that whipped cream aspect, which is a little fattier, but there's also like almost underneath that something like the mixture of milk and in cooked wheat cereal or something, which I really like a lot, which is not really gourmand in this very kind of over the top sort of, cake sense, but much more of a almost like a nutritive or something like, I don't know, breakfast food, fortifying breakfast food kind of gourmand, if you will, right? I mean,
who was the inventor of the graham cracker? Is it Alexander Graham or another first name Graham, who like was really into the idea of almost like self-flagellation through nutrition?
Yes, right. Was it Kellogg one? It was like that, or
Oh, it could have been. I don't know, but it was
Yeah.
basically his whole shtick was like, food is nutrition only and not to be
Nutrition
enjoyed
only, yeah,
because it's a
exactly.
carnal sin,
Right. Yeah,
And
right.
I guess there is sort of that like somber quality about most slumber house fragrances, especially this one, but it's still somehow very pleasant and very full bodied without being heavy. And I just don't understand how he did that.
Yeah. It's a really interesting perfume. I like it quite a bit. I do. Yeah.
Such an interesting house as well. I sort of,
Same.
I'm thankful / hate you for introducing me to them, because I know that they're going to be even less available in the UK, but
They are.
the ones that I have smelled have just been spellbinding. Surprised that, well, let's see if you've picked them for the magical category, but to me they are a fragrance house that would fit in that magical category quite well.
A lot of my picks for this lot of categories that we're doing kind of easily transition to the other categories. So that is an interesting thing to know. And it's funny that that's happening more so than any other group of categories. It's funny that it's happening in the weird categories, right? The sort of I don't want to call them periphery categories, because many people find these, smoky and milky scents to be some of their favorites. But
Right.
It is funny that that's the case, and I'm sure both of you have some cases where that's true for you too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The next category we have is natural. Now, I guess this leaves room for interpretation, right? Because we could be talking about natural perfumes, we could be talking about natural smelling things that just remind you of something of nature. So I'm really curious to see where you two have brought this
I
this
actually
category.
kind of like to start because I think a perfume that kind of in a few ways covers that very topic and what you just said in an interesting way. So I picked one which is kind of, I think, an ultimate compliment, because I've received this as a sample just to wear, and I ended up writing about it, and I wore the sample so much I just have to buy this, right? And that to me is always a sign that something's good. So this is from an American indie perfumer, Dawn Spencer Hurwitz, or also known as DSH, and it's a fragrance called Samarkand. And as you might imagine, it's an a kind of Near Eastern or kind of Caucasus-based reimagined. It's so damn fascinating. And if you were to look up the notes, you'd be kind of just floored at what's in here. What I found interesting about it is that the fact that it happens to be made of all natural things is very secondary to the purpose of the perfume. So in other words, if you dig a little bit into the description on her site or at any of the people who sell her work, she doesn't promote this as, oh, this is an all natural perfume. And she works in a whole bunch of different media, and working in all naturals isn't her sole thing. She works in any kind of media, but this also is one of these unbelievably rich fragrances that has a bit of the kitchen sink in it. But what I love in particular is that it actually has real ambergris in it. And so she's made what's essentially an amber accord with actual ambergris. And it's really kind of phenomenal what comes out of that. So it's rare enough to find a beautiful, bold fragrance that has a lot of sillage and is very bright, but it has a rich amber presence with a lot of spice and tea and many things in it, but also has actual ambergris in it as well. Like there's so much going on in it. And what I think is so beautiful about it is the fact that you really do feel, and I think this is a hard thing to accomplish, you really do feel a sense that this is possibly how fragrances may have been made from a different period of time, which I've always liked and appreciated about perfumes that have actual ambergris in it, is that it has that certain quality of not necessarily that sort of musty fustiness that sort of artificial ambergris has, but this actual slightly saline, deep, a little bit like costus or like bulb flower type of smell that's kind of embedded deeply in there. A little bit like a slightly faded potpourri type smell. It's very hard to describe it, but it's almost like also opening an old compact of powder or old makeup or something. Like it's got an antique smell, and yet it's absolutely beautiful. And the fact that it's all natural seems secondary, and I think it just gave her a different set of boundaries to work within, a different set of rules or different kind of place of engagement as a perfumer to work within. But it's a wonderful fragrance, and I think she makes some really terrific compositions. But I think this particular imagining of that being part of the Silk Road and all of the different sort of cultural, I mean, a lot of parts of that part of the world was so much of a crossroads of different cultures, and remains to be in many ways. Did see this kind of melding of so many different raw material in one place, and this really captures that spirit incredibly well. It does.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it's a stunner. I'll have to send you some of this, Nicola. You'd really enjoy this a lot, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think are we going to touch on the naturals versus synthetics debate? As part of this discussion, because it could be a discussion all of its own right. We could spend an hour doing that, but
right.
Are naturals, my opinion, are naturals better than synthetics? No. I like mixed media. I think we've got such a wonderful palette of materials available for perfumers to use, then we should use them. I think you see a lot of misinformation around naturals, and it doesn't tend to be from the brands. It tends to be from, influencers or people who are not particularly well educated around things like allergens. You see a lot of people saying, well, I wouldn't put a synthetic on my skin. I'd rather use a natural because it's less likely to cause an allergy, which just isn't true. So there is a lot of wrong information and misinformation and people peddling certain things for their own agenda out there. And I think we've got to be really careful when navigating that space, because as well, there are, as we'll know, there are materials like vanillin, which are part of vanilla, but that can be synthesized synthetically. So then do you class it as a natural or as a synthetic? Because it occurs in the natural product, but can be made in a lab. So it gets really murky and really difficult. So I think when somebody does a natural well, it can be really applauded because they're working with a smaller set of materials. They're working, as you say, with a different set of rules. And so when it's done well, it's like being able to paint a masterpiece using only 2 or 3 colors rather than a whole, 50 or 60. And a brand that does that really well for me is Hiram Green. So I admire a lot of Hiram's work and very much like 3 or 4 of his perfumes and would wear on a regular basis. He likes to kind of refute this idea that naturals are boring, because sometimes they can be, they can lack the diffusiveness and the exuberance of a mixed media fragrance. And Hiram likes to challenge that idea. And I think he does that really successfully. So my pick for natural perfume is Vetiver by Hiram Green, which came out, I think, last year. Mm-hmm. And it's, in some respects, quite a simple perfume because it's about vetiver and it smells of vetiver and it does exactly what you expect it to on the tin. but I admire the way that Hiram got really good longevity out of the formulation. He got really good projection out of it. It's a natural perfume that behaves more, to my nose, like a mixed media perfume. And I really like Vetiver. I do find it, sometimes it can be a little bit masculine, sometimes it can be a little bit old-fashioned. But actually, I found Vetiver by Hiram Green, it took the nice nostalgic parts of Vetiver and sort of, I wouldn't say updated them, but it spanned them in a new way, so that it's a satisfying fragrance to wear. It's a very fulsome fragrance to wear. And I just think he did a really good job of it. It's good. It's nice. It has a kind of old school Hollywood glamour vibe about it. Yes, it probably does lean slightly more masculine. But when I want to smell Vetiver, that is the perfume that I pick up, because it is just full of different nuances of Vetiver. I find it that it is a study in itself, really quite fascinating.
Not all natural perfumes kind of take that direction of just studying a single material, but I think all natural perfumes have the ability to talk about individual, landmark materials in ways that are really powerful, like you said there, Nicola. And so my selection for a natural fragrance follows that same logic. It's not named necessarily immediately after sandalwood, but it is named after a city that's named after sandalwood. It's called Vientiane from Providence Perfume Company. And so this one, the name is referring, of course, to the capital city of Laos, which does translate to, I believe, city of sandalwood. And it uses 3 different extractions of sandalwood in it. And similar to you there, Nicola, I really like it because it is sort of like that study of different facets of sandalwood, as though the perfumer Charna had reconstructed, took sandalwood apart at a molecular level and then put it back together again in a way that emphasizes its really desirable qualities, a little bit of the milkiness that we all know and love, but it doesn't lack woodiness as a sandalwood heavy perfume, but I think it sort of pushes the other elements of the material a bit further. So the perfume is built on a carrier liquid of a tincture of rice. And the really fascinating part about that is that, rice has a powdery, a semi-powdery smell. It's sort of like that starchiness that we associate and that you can literally see disappear off rice when you rinse it underwater. And that makes its way into the oil of the perfume. And it is, something that kind of wisps away and then comes back a few hours later as you're wearing it. It's a quality that adds that kind of texture. And what's really interesting about that is that, sandalwood can be conveyed through synthetic boosters, if you will, in a kind of powdery direction. But this is really interesting to me because it doesn't exacerbate the stuffy qualities that powdery notes and materials that emphasize powder as a note can often bring fragrances in that kind of stuffy, overwhelming direction. It doesn't do that here. Instead, you get more of a textural, like I said, starchiness that's really cool, and it pairs brilliantly with sandalwood and kind of exacerbates that inherent quality that sandalwood has, and plays off that woodier textures as well in really fun ways. So Vientiane from Providence Perfume Company would be my pick because it kind of studies the material and kind of picks it apart and puts it back together and really throws sandalwood right in your face and pairs it with a really beautiful companion of rice. A literal rice tincture is what she uses.
Yeah, that sounds superb. I love sandalwood, as you know.
And it's a beautiful fragrance. Yeah, I've enjoyed that one a lot. It's really, really, really good.
Do either one of you want to begin with a modern pick?
Well, I'll take it because I found this quite easy, actually. controversially perhaps.
Ooh.
So my pick for this is Molecule 01 by Eccentric Molecules, which to me is the embodiment of modern perfumery. It's an entirely synthesized molecule, which smells gorgeous, smells different on different people. Some people can't smell it. Apparently, I learned at an exhibition that the actual molecule of ISOE super is sometimes too big for people's receptors. So my friend Sophie, who characterizes all smells, she's not a frag head, you'll be surprised to know. She characterizes all smells as good smell, bad smell, or no smell. She seems to have quite a limited range of smell. And so I made a smell molecule number 1, and she couldn't smell it at all. She was like, it just smells of air. But yeah, and so I sort of subsequently learned that sometimes it can kind of flood your receptors and you can't pick it up.
That's fascinating.
But I love it. I love ISOE Super. I love Timber Silk. I love all that stuff in that oeuvre. It was very popular, and then there was a bit of a backlash of people being like, oh, I can smell it and everything, I don't like it. I really like it. If I'm wanting a relaxed day, I find the whole Eccentric Molecules, the actual molecules rather than the perfumes, I find them all quite, or at least several of them, quite nice to wear for when you just want a relaxed day. I like number 2 as well. But to me, that level of synthesization of a particular ingredient and then turning that into a perfume is the whole characteristic, to me, that embodies a really, really super modern, almost futuristic fragrance. And they're not at too high a price point. They're a good way if you're dipping your toe in to this sort of world and you want to immediately get a kind of bang for your buck, if you can smell it. Molecule 1 is a great way to do that. It's one of those that I used to wear to an open plan office back in the days when we had offices, and people would always say, oh, I like your perfume, what you're wearing. And it does have a sort of different cast on different people. So yeah, I that's what I go for, and I still wear it and would still reach for it, and yeah, like it.
Now, you said something that I think is kind of key to where I went with my choice, insofar as back when we had offices. And I say that because, I was thinking a lot about this category and what it means. And I was wondering if I should choose kind of like your version of a modern scent being like this kind of simplified, pared, like in this case, extremely pared down formula that's based on the power of contemporary synthetic materials, because I think when we think modern, maybe I don't know if this is just me and how my brain works, but I feel like many of us sometimes think like almost futurism, right? Like pseudo futurism, like we're like, maybe that's just a sign of the times, where when we think modern, we actually are thinking over above what is happening in the moment, and is actually something that is referring to a dreamscape of the near future. But in my case, I wondered like, what is modern, and like what is modern right now? And I think something that's important to note is that right now, we are living in a world that's still being impacted by COVID. And so this is the tie into your office statement there, Nicola. And a lot has changed in the modern world because of COVID. And so I'm wondering, like, obviously we've seen some comments about what we think the perfume community is doing right now in response to how we've been living the last few years. And I think one of the effects that it's had on us is that we as consumers really want to seek out steadiness and happiness and measured joy, I think, is really it. Like, yeah, the world is still kind of chaotic and up in the air, not just because of the disease, but because of like, war and income inequality and all these things that you hear about on the day-to-day, week-to-week. And, we have this sort of lingering sense of dread, I think, many people who are alive right now and worrying about the world. So I think something we're seeing in perfume as a response to that, being the recreational art that it is, we're seeing the market respond to providing that sense of comfort. So I think there are a number of ways that the perfume community is doing that. One of the ways, I think, is to remind us of like things that are just outside, or I'm seeing a lot of like perfumes that are reminding you that there is an outside and that you can go to it and you can have a nice time out there because you've been in here. So here's how I've justified this concept as a choice in this exercise. I've chosen Amber Teutonic from Dias and Durga. I'm sorry to talk about another Dias and Durga scent, but it seemed appropriate. So what I'm interested in Dias and Durga as a line in general is that many of their perfumes do this very like talking about places in America thing that is really interesting to me. And I think we see all the time places in France, places in the Mediterranean, and Durga does it for the United States and North America in general. They are really devoted to that idea. And in this case, Amber Teutonic isn't about America. It's one of their few perfumes that really isn't about a place that's, based in the US, but I do think it is about being outside and about being in an outdoor location, but it isn't an outdoorsy scent to me. To me, it is a very, again, tying it back to the theme here of modern, I think it's a very modern idea, especially in the wake of the last couple of years, to make perfumes that are a little outdoorsy, but also have an element of them that make them very wearable and very smooth and very kind of pared down. In this case, it's pine and sort of coniferous sense of outdoors, but paired into this amber accord and made into this very like smooth, kind of almost a little bit linear fragrance. And I'm seeing that as a big trend in the industry right now. And I think it's a very modern thing. I think it's a very contemporary thing, if I'm going to bring it a step further. And I think it's built on other modern things. I think it's built on an outdoorsy trend in the niche space in general. I think it's built off of, the comfort, like I said, the comfort due to the state of the world trend that we're seeing. And I think for this reason, this confluence of, modern factors outside of perfume affecting what perfume does is why I think this is justifiable. I know that was kind of a big conceptual pick, and I'm sorry for that, but it really is a fragrance that I see as very modern. I don't think ambers of the past wouldn't smell like this, and so ambers of the now apparently do. That's my loose but hopefully justifiable tie-in for this perfume to modernity and scent.
No, I like that approach actually, Adam, because I feel like amber has actually gone through a kind of reassessment, if you will, and I've been noticing this interesting trend. I mean, some trends are just silly, but one interesting trend I've noticed has been this sort of amber being thought about differently, instead of just being sweet and sticky, but as a more of like, how does it reflect the times we're in now, and I have noticed these drier or more linear amber experiences as sort of jumping off points that don't become smoke or don't become leather, don't become gourmand, don't all of those things, and I'm really curious about fragrances like that, and I agree with you. I think it has a lot of space to be very modern, to be a very modern approach toward fragrance wearing now, because I'm not sure that those heavier ambers, either for this time of year or even for where we are right now, for like, in all of this era of uncertainty, is necessarily the most appropriate sort of kind of a thing, really, I mean, or more or less what people are looking for at this time. So that's an interesting take on that topic, definitely.
I like the idea of amber as being a fixed point that can almost travel through time as well, because amber accords have been around for a while.
Right.
What does a modern take on that look like, and how does that compare to one from 50 or 100 years ago? I think that's quite an interesting way of viewing it as well. But also, part of me really wants to know, what trends do you think are silly, John?
Oh, I mean, I think it's I should, I know, right? Well, how do I package that one, right? But I mean, I think you can sort of see there maybe part of it is the trends that just sort of pop up that are that seem sort of random, you know, where they, it's sort of like that a wheel where just random things, the dial just happens to fall on something. And then you see where I think trends are more of a reaction to legitimate things that are happening out there, and they seem to be somewhat intelligent responses to real world pressures or realities or something. And I find those more interesting. I don't think either is more valid than the other, but some of, I mean, like, you know, if suddenly banana perfumes are the thing, then it may just seem like, well, it's the fruit that happens to be on sale today. You know what I mean? Which is such a randomness that I can't really say like, oh, I really support the banana perfume movement. Like that just, it's like saying bananas and peaches, like whatever, like, I don't know. But if there's a movement towards something and it seems like a reaction to something in our psyche or a world reality, that seems a little bit more based in something historical or factual, and I can sort of find more interest in that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, it totally does.
Okay.
Although for Christmas, I'm sure going to get you the banana perfume movement t-shirt.
And I sort of picked that randomly, but I know it's because I bought some Korean banana soap, which is amazing. That's sitting up in my bathroom, and I've been using it for months now, and I love that stuff. But so I actually do like the smell of bananas. So contrary to my claim before. So I guess I'll toss my hat in the ring. So actually, you're what you perceived as a tenuous connection to modernity. Adam, mine is going to seem really like a stretch, and you can all call me out for this one. So
blow our minds, John.
Yeah, no, I worry that mine's going to just feel like, oh, come on. So I think there are, you know, I was thinking about some things that are minimal, some things that are very urban. I noticed too, I was gearing toward like, okay, what are some very urban fragrances? Because I even have some things that are called things like, you know, concrete or, you know, asphalt, and, you know, things that have that kind of, you know, non-perfume or almost anti-perfume or anti-smell kind of, you know, things. And some of those do, of course, they have smells. They're just sort of not specifically non-traditional smells. But then something really struck me, and you have to kind of follow with me here. I was with some friends, and we were doing a little bit of a group smelling event, sort of, you know, just a few friends about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I took out a perfume that I purchased, but I hadn't smelled in quite some time. And I was struck by, first of all, it's a slightly old-fashioned composition, but I was really struck by how oddly modern it smelled, because it almost is anachronistic now, because it is so old-fashioned in some ways that it's like, this is for some younger folks, this may seem like, what the hell is this? Is this weird perfume from space? Because I don't know these smells, you know, and I'm not setting up some kind of like age hierarchy type thing, but there are some notes in it that are just really kind of odd, and they're not necessarily in vogue or popular right now. And so I was really struck by the much broader sort of wheel of change within perfumery, where some things go out of fashion for like 100 years and then come back, you know. So it brings me to this fragrance, which is Romanza by Milano, which is oddly a kind of, you know, green floral fragrance, but, you know, people are not really making a lot of green floral fragrance with narcissus in it right now. It's not a thing, which has a lot of myrrh in it, for example, and a kind of sweet amber. And it's got that really, really strong, you know, one of the people at the table really hated this fragrance, and like, oh God, that's weirdly old fashioned and I don't like it. And this is just from, if I want to say this is from 2015. Okay, so this is fairly new. So it has a bit of hyacinth, very bold narcissus smell, which has that kind of funky off flower. So, I mean, you've got two bold flowers. You've got bold and bulb flowers. So narcissus and hyacinth, both of them have that sort of funky, like flowers slightly going off smell, plus some jasmine, and then this really strong vetiver and myrrh, and in a kind of a greenish amber at the bottom. So what you end up with is something that would strike somewhere as unbelievably old-fashioned, to the point of being, what am I smelling? Like, is this, I don't even know what these plants are, because I don't smell these commonly in perfume right now. So it's not woody, it's not that kind of generic sort of fruit patchouli. It's not, you know, a lot of these sort of more modern profiles. And so this really struck me as a case where something modern can be very much a look further back to a previous period of perfume, and a re-examination of notes and accords that we don't use as frequently. And actually, you know what? As I've said that, I might have convinced myself that I think I'm in the right here. So I'm going to stick by it. So that's my case for modern.
I love it.
Yeah, I think you made a good case for it there. I think you convinced all of us.
We have one more category, and this is sort of where we, I think, probably gave ourselves the most license a little bit. You know, when we thought about what our part, what this part would entail of this series, we thought we have to do something that's like, you know, fantasy or magical or you know, fairy tale-esque. And I think that we all have maybe one smell that we, at least, that has that sort of association, right? That's sort of like that magical, like, wow, that's from almost from another world, you know, that might have never existed. So I'm curious to see what you two have brought for that.
Go on, John.
All right. Okay, go ahead. So I just went total. I think this needs to go with like something straight from, you know, kind of heart and soul. And I went for something that I bought a while back. I do not wear this very often, probably because of its magical properties, right? Because you want to be careful of the responsibility of that magic. This is an homage fragrance, and this is Journey. And, you know, they don't do this any longer. They used to just kind of segregate these by gender. So this was Journey Man. What I think I love so much about this, and why I give it sort of magical, properties, is that it's kind of within that realm of the spicy tobacco, you know, with a whole bunch of odd spiky things in it, such as, you know, there's like cypriol in here, pretty hefty dose of cypriol, tonka bean, Sichuan pepper, which has that beautiful kind of like lemony aspect to it. But there's something about the exact, you know, alchemical mixture of those things in it that really create this, like, something that is so much larger than the sum of its parts. And that's what I think I love so much about Journeyman, and why it still smells a little bit like magic to me when I wear it and when I smell it. I mean, just now smelling it on the strip, it's so transportive, and it's so rich. It doesn't, I mean, I can tell you what's in it, and, you know, I'm smelling a bit of the cardamom that's in here as well, but it's so much more than those pieces. And that's where I think it is like kind of this like, you know, kind of a smoldering brew in a big cauldron. And how was this made? I have no idea. I don't know how it got made, but yet it was made. This is my pick for that. Yeah.
Yeah, alchemists and magicians made it. That's how.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
And that's the vision we all want to have for our treasured perfumes, right?
Yes.
Nicola, can you go next? Because I have a running theory, and I want to see how that plays out.
Okay. So mine is Miracula by Angela Champagne. I think you could pretty much pick any of Angela's perfumes and you would get something magical from them. They smell like scents that have been plucked right out of fairy tales, but not saccharine sweet fairy tales. These are fairy tales where sometimes the bad guy wins, sometimes the monster eats the heroine. They're not sanitized, they're real world mythologies. Miracula is, you know, it's a scent that does have a lot of vetiver again, funnily enough. But to me, it calls to mind the quietness that will befall the earth when one day humans just mysteriously vanish. And it makes me think of the magic of nature pushing its way through concrete. So, you know, when you get a tarmac road that doesn't get driven on all the time, and you get those little like dandelions that manage to move concrete, and they break through the concrete with their planty tenacity. This makes me think of that because it has a very austere tarmacy type element to it, and then it has these little sprigs of greenery just peeking through, and it just takes me to this kind of post-apocalyptic world where nature takes over, and in my head I get a really kind of cinematic sort of impression of this world that was full of tarmac and concrete and is now slowly being taken back. And just as you kind of pan out and as the scent wears, you just see in the distance this person, this one survivor, this revenant that has retained their place in the world and has got a place in this new hierarchy. I want to write novels about Angela's perfumes. They're so good. They're so transportive. They're so magical. There is magic in these scents, and I don't know why or how she does it, but they are just beautiful. You know, I've talked about some of them before. Liquor is another beautiful one. Rosarium is another one, but this one for me is particularly magical, and just I sometimes fear to wear it because I worry that I might wake up in that post-apocalyptic world.
Oh, that's amazing.
Good.
And it's called Miracular?
Miracular, yeah.
Miracular. That's a great name as well.
Yeah. It's sort of fitting for the category, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
So go on, Adam. Was your theory borne out?
So can you tell me more if there is a note of Cypriol, aka Nagarmotha, in that one?
There might be. Just look at it.
Very interesting to know this.
1 second while I consult Fragrantica.
Nice plug for Fragrantica.
So we've got green accord, cyclamen, Sicilian lemon, tuberose, amberette, amber, vanilla, exotic woods, and musk. So no Nagamotha listed.
Well, darn.
It could come under exotic woods, possibly.
Could, yeah. No, I suppose. I think, you know, obviously saying the word exotic is probably not, you know, is probably a word association where magical has an interlapping. I would say that it's interesting, though, because 2 out of 3 of our choices have Cypriol in, or at least listed. And my choice is 20 Mars 2022 from Rundholz Perfumery. Rundholz is a German fashion brand that also has dipped its toes into the fragrance pool. So, okay, like this is one of those scents where you smell it, and I'm almost hesitant to smell it because I will say it's quite potent. And it's one of those scents where I only spray once, and that's fine. And it's sort of also the type of scent where you smell it right out of the bottle, and it's like throwing itself at you, and it kind of sticks in your nose for a moment. So 20 Mars 2022 is magical to me because it kind of has, it suggests to me, I don't know why this is, the idea of a fairy tale, you know, and I could have chosen a number of slumber house scents for this too, but we've discussed them at length before. So 20 Mars 2022 has this like gingerbread kind of note to it that is so rich to the extent that it almost seems menacing. You know, when you smell gingerbread, I think for most of us, you smell something that's very friendly and very like holiday-esque and something that, you know, typically brings some happier connotations. But I don't know, here it's not so bright and sunshine and rainbows. I mean, it feels very potent and poisonous. Like if you eat it, like it's almost like you're you know, you're Hansel and Gretel and you're getting your just desserts at the candy house, you know. That being said, I wouldn't necessarily qualify this as just a sweet perfume. I mean, it has many elements to it that are really quite all over the place and not sweet at all. The base notes alone list Cypriol, which has this kind of, I don't want to say bitter, but it has that like kind of, John, you might be better at describing this than I am, but I kind of think of Cypriol as this very aged, woody, musty.
It's a slightly medicinal, like it often reminds me of like cough drops or something, or like or like cough drops from like a Chinese herbal shop or something. It's like it's that kind of very
absolutely
smell, but beautiful smell. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of spice in this too. There's a saffron note listed. There's an amber accord listed. There's vanilla listed and other things as well that skew a bit spicy. But there's also things like parsley and strawberry and heck, just some white florals just for fun. In fact, when you look at the note list on the Fragrantica page for this, it's almost funny because you're looking at a really stacked top notes list, a really stacked base notes list, and the middle notes are and those two, top and base, are really kind of diverse and kind of odd. And you look at the pairings, like, how does that work? And then the middle notes are so like milk toast. They're like lily of the valley, rose, and jasmine. And you're like, what? That's it? That can't be. Anyway, it sort of defies expectations in a number of ways, but it is magical to me because it is definitely the association of fairy tale. I think I'm definitely not the first person to say that about it, but it is threatening. It's almost like there's this idea that the Brothers Grimm fairy tales have been edited highly over time for reading to children, and even some of those edited versions can be a little frightening or scary. But the original versions of those same fairy tales, as the Grimm brothers collected them, were much more severe, for lack of a better term, and much more dour and depressing and explicit. And I think this is like the unedited Grimm brothers fairy tale. This is the carnage of fairy tales, and sort of learning a lesson in a very serious way. You pay for this perfume with your skin. You don't just put it on your skin, right? I mean, it is a powerful fragrance that projects like few other things that I've ever smelled. But it has a nice side. It's not all, it's not necessarily unapproachable. It's just very out of left field, very everything in but the kitchen sink kind of approach to perfumery, and certainly unlike anything else I've ever smelled. And in fact, I would say that if you really like heavy ambers, if you like slumber house perfumes at all, if you like these really intricately complicated perfumes, then 20 Mars 2022 has got to be on your to smell list, because it has a whole cast of characters that somehow form to create this one very serious and nuanced smell that I think is really worth experiencing. It is very magical to me. It's also a little bit scary to me.
And great pick that it is. It's a great fragrance, that one.
So we did want to say briefly that we aren't going to go away. It seems like some folks have been enjoying this series, and we appreciate your support there. So we thought maybe we'll try to expand it into some other either subcategories or other, in fairness, very large categories that we haven't touched on yet. And would love to see some input there, and would love to hear your thoughts on maybe even other strange categories as well that you'd like us to talk about. But we are planning on doing that some more. First, we are going to cover some summer picks in the meantime. So we'll return with this in a couple of weeks or so, but in the meantime, we'll start cooking up a summer video for you next.